Welcome to the first tutorial. I want to start by working on the navigation and basics of Blender, and first I'll talk about the navigations. So if you want to orbit around the scene, you would hit the middle mouse to orbit around the scene. So on my bottom left, I'm showing my shortcuts. So middle mouse to orbit around, shift and middle mouse to pan around the scene, and if you want to zoom in and out, you would scroll the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Now, those are the basic navigations. And another form of navigation that I always like to use is to use the viewpoints, which you can find in the viewpoint menu. Now, the cool thing is that most of the time, you can see the shortcuts whenever you hover over a tool. And in my case, the ones I use the most is probably the front, which is numpad 1, the right, which is numpad 3, and the camera, which is numpad 0, and top, which is numpad 7. So let me just add in a different object. You don't need to follow this part, but try hitting on your keyboard numpad 1 to go into the front view. And you can see on the top left, we are in front orthographic. The reason why it says orthographic is because whenever you're in orthographic mode, your perspective is taken away. So for now, you'll see that we're in perspective, but if I were to hit numpad 5, we will be in orthographic, and you'll see that the lines aren't really converging as they would with perspective in real life. So yeah, whenever you're modeling, it's really useful to just have it in orthographic. So numpad 1 to go to front view, numpad 3 to go into the right orthographic, numpad 7 to go into the top view, and 0 to go into the camera view. Now the camera view is whatever the camera sees, and whenever you render, this will be how your final image will look. For example, if I were to go into camera view and just switch to the rendered view, this is probably what you will see for your final render. For example, if I were to hit render and just go into the rendering tab, you'll see that this is our final image. And if you want to save it, you can go into image and save as, but for now we won't really save this. That's pretty much it for the navigation and viewpoints. I'll talk a bit about all the editors that we have. Let me just switch back to solid view. So over here, we have our 3D viewport, which is where we'll do all of our modeling. Now, if you want to maximize a viewport, you can hit Control and space to just maximize it. So over here, you have your outliner, which you can think of as a file explorer. Everything that you select in your outliner with left click is also selected over here in the 3D viewport. Now, you'll see that we have different kind of objects, and it's really important to know the difference because some objects are mesh objects like this. And if you were to look at your properties panel, you'll see that there are a bunch of different tabs. And especially when I select a mesh object, you'll see that you can add modifiers, which are some procedural ways of modeling. And this is something that we'll use quite often, especially the mirror and maybe the bevel and boolean. And for example, if I were to click on a light, you'll see that the properties change. So on a mesh, we have the modifiers, but when I click on the light, it is other properties. So for example, only the light would have the light properties, and you can definitely go into your render view and you can just change the color of the light, and you can definitely try lighting up your scene if you want to. But for now, I'll just leave it as it is. And even a camera has its own properties. For example, you can change your focal length or depth of field or things like that. But I actually won't really use it until we are compositing and stuff like that. Other than that, we also have our animation timeline over here, which we won't really use. It is used to play our animations. And whenever we don't need an editor, what I can do is to just dissolve the workspace. So you can just right click on the border, do a join areas, and just put your mouse down so that it's facing downwards, and just left click and you'll see that we have dissolved it. If you want to bring it back or add in your own editors, for example, sometimes we may need to add in an image editor to add in more references. You can always just pick a corner and just drag a corner up, or you can also just select the border, right click and do a horizontal split or vertical split depending on what you need, and just left clicking. And if you want to change it back to the timeline, you would just click on this to switch editor types and just switch it to a timeline. And now it'll be back to the way it was before. But for now, I'll just dissolve it again. Join areas, like so. I also want to go over the different selects that we have. So the basic one we have is left click. So you can left click any object you want. Shift and left click will let you select more than one. If you click on a background, then it'll just deselect everything. And also, you'll see over here, if you just left click and hold, you can see that there are a bunch of different selects, and you can press W to cycle between them. Now, instead of pressing W to cycle between them, I usually just cycle until I'm on this, which is just a basic select. And if you were to press the shortcut B, you can use the box select. And if you left click and drag, you can select everything in it. But another thing is that if you do a middle click and drag, you can deselect things that are inside the box. So that's pretty useful as well. Now, we can also use our circle select. And if you use your mouse wheel, you can increase or decrease the influence. This is really useful if you want to select like really small points and stuff like that. But obviously that's something we'll do in edit mode. So C to circle select and left click and drag to just select them. And if you want to deselect them, you can just middle click as well. Another useful shortcut is if you use shortcut A, you can select everything, and double tapping A will just deselect everything as well. Now you can go to the select menu, and there are many other ways you can select. Maybe some that you might use is invert. For example, you'll have this and you'll hit Control I and it'll just select everything else that isn't selected. And that can definitely be super useful as well. You'll see over here, we have our basic layout workspace, which has our 3D viewport, our outliner, and our properties, but there are actually many different ones that you can try out. For example, one useful one is the UV editing one, because whenever we are going to UV our objects, we definitely need a UV editor as well. And you can definitely create your own by just adding a custom workspace and customizing it to your own needs. But that is something we'll work on quite later. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the first navigation and basics video. I'll see you in the next one, where we will probably talk about our transforms and adding in references.